personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world for information that businesses need to know now. So I have an extraordinarily special guest. I have Chris Roberts on the show today. Chris Roberts, he calls himself Chief Geek at the Hillbilly Hit Squad. I have followed Chris for many years, and you are like a bolt of lightning. So you really, the content that you put out is so striking because it's so different than what other people talk about. So, you talk about not only cyber and stuff like that, but you also talk about sort of life. And living, because we are humans, right? Sometimes we forget that, and so we have kind of human things that we go through. So I get excited whenever I see that you've written kind of a long post. I like sort of, I flag it and say, okay, I got to sit over here and like actually absorb what it is, because a lot of times you just can't go past it without like making a comment or saying something about it. Also, I'll say that when I decided I wanted to start a podcast, you were on my wish list of people that I wanted to talk to. And what I found when I looked at the people that I wanted to talk to, I've been fortunate, extraordinarily so, that I've been able to talk to almost all the people on that list. So that's great. So you're like a holdout, because you're like really top on that list. But I think the common thread is that the people that I like to seek out are people who are talking about things that other people aren't talking about. And you do that. You do that a lot. So I really like it. And I'll also say, this is so funny. So I don't know, I guess you were like an enigma wrapped in a riddle for me for many years, because I had never met you, but I like follow your stuff. And I think at one point on your LinkedIn profile, you had like a drawing or something. So I didn't know what you looked like at that point. And then I had the pleasure of being invited to do a panel with you for MIT. You and I did that FIDO Alliance thing, a fast password online. And I was like, I arrived. I'm on a panel with Chris Roberts. It was so cool. So welcome to the show. And I'd love to let's just flow. Let's just chat.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, that profile picture, if I remember rightly, that's the one done by he's not a friend, he's family. A guy by the name of Eddie Mize, who's in the industry. In fact, we should get him and you and him talking as well. Another one of those just amazing humans in the industry who's spent a long time both in the corporate side of the world trying to affect change, and then outside in other areas, and his artwork is just absolutely amazing. And he's almost always at like DEF CON and B-Sides and a bunch of others, and any money he gets from the artwork is automatically typically donated to like Electronic Frontier Foundation, Innocent Lives Foundation, Hackers for Charities, Hackers for Kids, all sorts of stuff. He's just one of those fucking good human beings.
That's so cool. Yeah. I don't know. Where should we start? What do you want to talk about today? What is top of mind for you today?
It's interesting. I just came off of having I've got a couple of like things lined up, and it's really interesting because there's so many people are still talking about technology. So many people are talking about, hey, we have to solve it with tech, we have to do this, and I raised up some points the other day. Somebody put a Google Doc out. In fact, I got the Google Doc up. Somebody put the Google Doc out about this, cyber event brainstorming. And I'm like, all right, let's take a look at it. And it was, let's talk about risks, which is good. Let's talk about scaling things. Let's talk about ransomware. And I'm like, how about we actually talk about humans? How about we talk about, we always talk about data privacy. And let's look at the human aspect of it. Let's look at the policies and the control aspect. Let's not keep running off and how do we buy more tech to solve the problem? Let's take that step back and look at the human behind it. And it's we seem to, for whatever reason, have left the human behind in so much of what we do these days. And I think, to your point, a lot of the times when I look at my posts, when I put my posts together, I try to put a human element in there. I try to make it much more personal, because if I sit there and I'm just like, well, here's the tech and here's this, it kind of goes in here and one out, and out the other ear. But if you try to humanize the story, or you try to weave in something, put humor in it. Humor is always an interesting one, or something that makes people think. And that way it doesn't have to be controversial, but it has to be provoking. I always talk about the blinky lights. I always talk about tasering people. I always look at these kind of things. It's like, look, there's some logic to this. We'll feel the same way. So let's actually humanize this situation a little bit more. And what can we do about it? How can we as humans approach it? And how can we collaborate together, rather than each one of us fighting our own bloody fights in our own damn silos?
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned silos. Silos are a big problem, right? Silos, when I look at people, like, say, for instance, people who do executives in corporations, or people who work in the business world, a lot of their teaching and a lot of their learning is about how to create silos, right?
Yeah.
So the problems that we have with sort of data privacy and cybersecurity, they are escalated because of silos. So we need to break those walls down. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really good friend who kind of tackled me on it, and he had a really, really good point, because I talked about blowing the silos up, and he's like, well, hold on a second. He's like, it's still useful to have them. It's still useful to have everybody in their own streams. No two ways about it. But you need to build more bridges, more doorways, more collaboration between them. So that silo almost ends up like, the Connect 4 boards, where you could go up and sideways and downwards and all sorts of other things. He's like, that to me would be more effective, because at the end of the day, you still need people in development to do development. No two ways about it. But you want them to have a mindset of approaching a problem with not just how to solve it, but also how to solve it in a safer and a more secure manner than maybe that some of them do. So I don't want you out of your damn silo, but I want you to acknowledge there's other tracks running right alongside of you. And maybe every now and again you look left and you look right and you go, I got you covered, and I got a question for you. And we all do that more effectively. So you end up building this almost lattice work. And to me, that made a lot of sense. I don't know, whatever metaphor, but at the end of the day, quite honestly, whichever way we look at it, it's like everybody's got to get there. They need to put their head above their cubicle and go, is there anybody else out there?
Yeah. I love that you talk about the human, because that's something I talk about a lot when I'm talking about data privacy. So, obviously I want businesses to be a business, right? Make money, but you can do that and also respect the rights of individuals. And then, I think one thing that will speak to corporations about, which, as you know, I'm sure you've had this experience too, where you say something very simple and it's shocking to them, which is the data that you have doesn't belong to you.
Yes.
So,
Oh, yeah, it's I think, again, because I mean, we've lived and breathed in this world for more years than probably you or I either care to admit to sometimes. And so we definitely see this world. But again, I think there's an awareness to look around. There's awareness to look in different businesses. There's an awareness, you're running your own business, you do your own thing, you understand what it takes to run a business more than just the tech and everything else. All the facets of that business, a lot of us understand. And some of that comes with age. I'd say age more than, say, a business degree or something like that. I think it's being in the trenches and understand what it takes to run it. So when you walk into the leadership discussions and you say, hey, by the way, here's not just my perspective, but here's something that you can think about. Here's something you can look at. And they're like, wow, I didn't think about that. And then, then you're like, well, hang on. how much of the rest of the business do you not understand? Because at the end of the day, technology and security is again, it's just one silo. You know, you look at manufacturing, you look at transportation, you look at construction, all these other areas that make a business actually function. And you're like, okay, if you don't understand that, what else are you missing that either I can help you with, or I can bring somebody else from another area of the business, and together we can sit down and do this. I think it always fascinates me sometimes. You get some amazing leaders who really understand how things work because they care. And you get some who are just chasing that almighty dollar and no matter what it takes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would love to talk about myths, right? This is something that you talk about a lot. You kind of pierce the veil on myths. I know you and I had a spirited discussion about the word hacker, and so I'm reminded a lot that in the media there are a lot of misconceptions about cybersecurity that are perpetuated, right? So one of the older ones, one of the more familiar ones that I'm sure that you know and we talk about a lot is well, two. One is that a hacker is a person who has a hoodie and he's in the basement of his mom's house.
Says the guy with the hoodie. We'll ignore that one for the minute.
Yes,
I
yes,
love my hoodies.
we'll
They're
ignore
warm and they're
that one.
comfortable.
And
Yeah,
then sort of the misnomer that someone who calls himself a hacker is a criminal.
yeah, yeah. It's I find a level of irony in that first stereotype. Mostly because I am. I mean, I love my hoodies. I mean, it's and again, people tackle me on the road like, oh, you don't like hoodies. I do. I love my damn hoodies. I hate saying, oh, hacker breaks in and you've got this shit going on. I'm like, quit that shit. Stop stereotyping us.
Yeah.
And I mean, we see it in life all the time. I mean, all walks of life. Let's be perfectly honest on this one.
Mm-hmm.
But the challenge is, sorry, the camera's gone fuzzy. It'll clear up in a minute when it realizes that it's my end.
That's fine.
It'll figure it out in a minute. Is that the challenge is the industry, the very industry that we are working in, that we're dealing with, arguably was formed with a lot of help and a lot of assistance from us that self-identify as hackers. So many of us are part of organizations, be it like 303, 2600, or all of these other B-sides, DEF CON, all these other ones have come about because that hacker mentality, that thirst for knowledge, that wanting to understand how something works, wanting to understand how to actually effect change. And change, hopefully more often than not, changes for the better. But there are definitely times when an organization needs to be, kicked into effecting change. So it's frustrating because you do get people who go rogue. No two ways about it. And there are people that have come from that side of the world that now run companies, are part of companies, are amazing contributors in this industry. There are those of us who have trodden that gray area and still do on a regular basis. And yet it's an ethics and morals conversation. If you're using those skills to do good, you can call yourself a hacker, a business person, a pen tester, or whatever you want. But if you cross over and you still use those skills for bad, at that point you're adversary, criminal, or something else. And unfortunately, the media, I don't know if we'll ever reclaim the word, to be perfectly honest. I'm not entirely certain we will, but even if I can't completely reclaim it, I still want to put out there, like a lot of us. I mean, there's the hashtag, hacking is not a crime. There's a bunch of us out there that are like doing our best to promote that mentality. We'll see if it happens. It's something I won't ever stop doing, because that's who I identify as.
You talk a lot about the future, and that's something that I love to talk about, right? I guess
Yeah.
let's talk about two things. One is, how do we get where we are now, and where are we going, or should we be thinking about going in the future?
Oh, so I love that stuff. It's a really fascinating topic. And it's kind of frustrating as well in some ways because I'm getting older. In no two ways about it. I've crossed that. I've got my half century in cricketing terms. I'm sitting there. I'm batting the next one, And so it's frustrating because I figure if I'm lucky, I've got 10, 20 years left in me. And yet I look at the future of technology, and on one hand, I'm absolutely astounded and amazed at the potential for what we can do. I joke about retiring to an AS400 in New Zealand. It's on a couple of things I've talked about. And yet I look at the technology and go, we're not too far off of, we are down the pathway from being able to do that. In other words, take a human and literally synthesize them into a set of digital signals. We're doing bits of it. We've got some interesting stuff going on behind the scenes that hasn't hit public, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you look at where technology is going, and you look at the advances that we have in really figuring out what we are as humans. So can I break a human down into a set of signals? If I can, how do I do it? What can I do? Where are we going? Where do we go? Where does it end? Does it end? If I can make us a set of signals, then why do I need to send a mission to Mars when I can just beam a bloody signal there? So there's all of that kind of stuff. And yet, on the other hand, you look at where we are today and you're like, yeah, we can't get people to remember passwords. And you're like, whoa.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I know it's like the technology is going way far ahead, and so we're definitely trying to keep up. I don't know. I feel like maybe we're not having the right conversations in some way. So
Yeah.
we're talking about a lot of us, right? Obviously, we want people to be better, right? And not fall for kind of the simple low hanging fruit types of tricks. But I feel like the harm in the future is so concerning, right? Where a person doesn't want to take your account password. They can literally impersonate you.
Oh my
Like they
gosh.
can
Yeah.
they can lock you out of your own life, right? So, I
Yeah.
feel like there's a bigger picture out there that we need to be thinking about.
100% with you on that one. Again, comes down to the data side of it, the data privacy, the use of data, the abuse of data. I mean, you look at how much data we're creating, and I remember a couple of years ago, the statistics were, it was like probably 90, no, what do we mean, like 20, a couple of years ago, somebody said, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've created like 95% of the data on the planet. You fast forward to now, and where we are now, you look at it and you go, hang on, they're now saying it's the last 2 years we've created like the 95 or 98% of the data that we're using. And we're exponentially increasing how much data we're producing, which exactly to your point means that there's some really cool stuff you can do with it, but there's unfortunately the nefarious and negative side. And we haven't, I mean, a perfect example, I was sitting on LinkedIn, and there was this, so Stanford University has been doing an investigation into bodily inputs and bodily outputs. So can you measure the health of a human by measuring bodily outputs? Well, yes, you absolutely can. So like, well, we'll make a digital toilet to do it for you. And on one hand, I'm like, cool idea, love the concept. But on the other hand, I'm like, so you're going to upload all of my data to the cloud? No, bad. Let's not do that. And by the way, it's probably going to go to Amazon to remind me to, order more vegetables and more bloody, more vitamins or crying. Oh, no, don't do that to me. So there are some fascinating and amazing things we can do with technology. There was a story a couple of years ago where one of the big supermarket chains was tracking what people were buying, and they could identify if somebody had like liver problems or heart problems, or if somebody was potentially pregnant, even before that person knew what was going on. Those, on one hand, are fascinating because you want to help people. But on the other hand, you've got to get the trust of the people to allow you to do that. And we are so far from that. I mean, we are so far. We've lost the trust of people, but they still use, I mean, everybody's on bloody Facebook, everybody's on social media, everybody hands over their email address for a 10% off coupon, yet we still complain about everything that's going on. We still get sold everything. It's a really weird dichotomy as to where we're going. I love the idea of using data to help people and save people. And I think the more we can bring that data together and ask the right questions is amazing. But it scares the hell out of me about the potential for the misuse of all of that data.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's talk a bit about corporations and businesses. So I can already see you laughing about this one.
As it go, all righty.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I guess the analogy for me is like, in the movie Titanic, before they got on the boat, they said, "Oh, the Titanic is the unsinkable ship." And I'm like, I
Yeah,
wouldn't get on that thing. I mean, because if you
yeah.
think your ship is unsinkable, that tells me you have like a huge blind spot. So in some ways, I feel like some corporations, that's sort of the way that they think. They think, "Oh, we're good. Nothing bad has happened yet, or something I don't know. So I don't need to take these, preemptive measures. I don't need to fund, the cyber folks. I don't need to hire, these people because I think we're good. What are your thoughts?
Oh, 100% with you. And unfortunately, uh, there's a I gave a talk fairly recently, and I talked about the trifecta. And I think I called it I think I called it the triad. I went after, I'm like, if we're going to call it what it is, let's call it, let's call it what it is. It's a triad. And you have like, there are three areas to it. From a corporation standpoint, they really are taking a step back and going, why do we have to do security? Because on one hand, they're being told they're going to put a tick in the box. Or in this case, in modern day and age, they're going to put lots of ticks in lots of different boxes, and we keep giving them different ticks and boxes, and we keep telling them they're going to put more ticks in more boxes. And so they're spinning in circles, wondering how many damn ticks they have to put in how many damn boxes. And we've called it audit, we've called it compliance, we've called it PCI, HIPAA, FERC, FISMA, CMMC. We keep giving these boxes new names. So on one hand, you've got a corporation sitting there going, well, how the hell do we do with this? On the other hand, if they don't put a tick in the box, well, there's not a huge amount of repercussions that actually happen. PCI isn't going to yank your credit card taking ability away. They've done it maybe once in the last 10 or 15 years, and that was to a small organization. So, okay, I got to spend a couple of million to do this, or I can just make it. I'll tell you, I'm working on it. Same thing with healthcare and a bunch of the other ones. So, and then you've got an entire industry. Our entire industry is built around putting a tick in the box. And we've put a level of complication around it, and we've put a level of craziness around it that now only certain people can come into your corporation to put those ticks in boxes, and they can only use certain types of colored types of pens to do it with. And so we've got the ridiculing there, and then you've got the poor consumer who's sitting there going, I just want to buy shit, or I want to get my healthcare, or I want to be able to pump my damn petrol.
Right.
So you've got this crazy trifecta, and the businesses are now saying, well, hang on, if I don't put the tick in the box, maybe I get breached, maybe I don't. And if I do get breached, all I have to do is go in front of Congress and go, I'm ever so sorry. I've got my insurance. Maybe I get money back, maybe I don't. But no matter what, I'm just going to pass the cost on to the consumer. Consumer, instead of paying $100 for insurance, now pays $125 for insurance, because that extra $25 just paid for me having to get all my stuff back. And they get to pay the ransomware. And if the feds tell them don't pay the ransomware, but they still pay it. And so we haven't gone to the corporations with an effective enough solution that's compelling enough for them to go, I get it. I understand why you're doing this. I understand what's going on. I can integrate it effectively, and it's not going to cause me crazy amounts of pain, suffering, and all these other things. We haven't done that because, again, as our industry, we're so bloody fragmented.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting.
And
I want
yeah, it's crazy. And I don't have a good solution. I really don't have a good solution.
to, yeah, let's talk a little bit about uh, just cybersecurity as a profession and how it fits into business. This is something that I've noticed, and to me, you're kind of going against this trend, which I love, which is, I had a dear friend told me that he thought um, his idea was when cybersecurity is working, it's supposed to be invisible. And so to me, that translated to I want to be invisible. But when you're invisible, that means you don't get the funding, right? You don't get the money. You don't get the acknowledgement of sort of what you're doing. And I think it just makes it harder for cyber to really prosper within organizations the way that they need to, right? Because there isn't enough visibility. So the thing that you do is really important. You do all these panels and speaking, and you're world renowned for being able to kind of speak out and tell your truth about cyber and the dangers that we're facing. But what types of things would you say that people in cyber need to do to really get more of a foothold in kind of, a seat at the table in the boardroom, or at least an ear? Because right now it's like, oh, we make widgets and that's so important. And we don't care about cyber until something happens like, okay, so you can't make widgets anymore because you're out of business, right? So it's like it should be more foundational as opposed to, well, yeah, we have let's wait till we have a problem and then we go to cyber.
Yeah, and that's the human nature aspect of it by far and away. It's, again, I think, right to your point, it's a soft skills. To me, it's the soft skills side of it. It's that, how have perfect again, I was on a talk earlier on today, and somebody started talking about SLRs, and I'm like, I don't know, flipping SLR. I waited for a second to see if they would explain what the Smith, and because I come out of the military world, an SLR to me is a self-loading rifle. I'm like, I know, I know what one of those is, but I'm not sure how it applies to what you're talking about, but we'll listen in on this one. And I ended up putting my hand up. I'm like, hey, what the heck's an SLR? And they explained to me. I'm like, all right, so why the hell didn't you say that? Well, it's our industry. I'm like, no, it isn't our industry. I'm like, you're talking to me. You're assuming I know what the hell you're understanding. Now you go before, exactly to your point, you go to a board or you go to leadership, and you start talking acronyms, or you start going in there and saying, hey, we stopped all this stuff at the firewall, or we've got all this, or we've bought IDS, IPS, DLP, EDR, XDR, NDR, and every other day. Leadership's going to look at you like you got three bloody heads, and 20 seconds later, they're going to be scrolling through their text messages. We can't continue to do that. If we want that seat at the board, we need to understand more effectively what business risk is, what makes the business tick, and literally what leadership actually cares about. And you're probably right, they don't care about cyber. And there is an argument to say we should, I just said, shit should just work. It's like when you walk into the building, you expect the door to open, you expect the elevator to work, you expect the lights to come on, you expect water to flow out of the taps. There is an argument to say the cyber world, and especially the security side of it, has become so integrated into our everyday lives that just like water coming out of the taps, it should work. We don't have to test our water every day. I don't go down every morning and put a pH balance in my water and run a spectrograph through the water to make sure the water's okay. I assume it's going to work. I assume the water's going to fly out of the tap properly. And I assume that when I drink the water or I feed it to my pets, none of us are going to keel over dead. Yet we expect people in their homes to understand the computing, understand the networking, to patch their systems, to patch their environment, to understand what ransomware is, to know that all their home systems are probably compromised, to know how to do this. Why doesn't it just work?
Also, let's talk a bit about sort of artificial intelligence, and I'll tell you what concerns me. The thing that, well, I have a lot of concerns with artificial intelligence, right? So I love technology, as do you. But the issue that I have with AI and having kind of these systems make these decisions so quickly about people and companies or governments taking action against people in a negative way, right? As a result of what a computer told them to do or what they thought, is that the harm, in my view, cannot have any adequate redress, right? So basically, the way we're doing this now is we're saying, oh, well, let's create these regulations, right? So then we create these privacy laws and we say, hey, you can't do this with someone's data, and then if you do, then we're going to fine you, and this bad thing is going to happen. The problem with that in something like AI, where you have algorithms that are making inferences and companies or organizations are making decisions, some of them not great, right? That can harm people. The harm comes fast, right? Or can come fast and swift, or maybe it can come slow, right? That's even worse, right? Where it's like drawn out. But if someone's life or liberty is impacted by that, there really isn't any adequate legal redress for that.
Yeah, it's interesting because so at the moment, if you look at artificial intelligence, what we have at the moment in the industry, and not just the industry, just in the world in general, is what we call a narrow AI, or an AI that's a narrow focus. So a perfect example would be like IBM's Deep Blue. Amazing at playing chess, amazing at doing that game show, and amazing at some other things. But if you turn around and say, hey, can you make me a cup of tea? It's going to curl up in a corner and whimper to itself because it won't have a flipping clue what to do with it, let alone analysis of tea, the human, and everything else. So it's good at doing very, very specific tasks. And the same thing in our industry, and the same thing, everything that we're dealing with on the military side of things, it has a narrow scope. You have drones up there that, exactly to your point, make a determination as to whether somebody lives or dies based off of a number of characteristics. At the moment, we have a human between that analysis and that decision point. So that live or die is still a very, very human decision. How long that continues to go for, to be seen. Beyond that, my biggest challenge is how often is that program being trained? So talk to me about the data that you're continually using to train it. Is that data refreshed on a periodic basis? Is it a near real-time data feed? Or did you upload data 6 months ago and go, yeah, we're all in good shape? And then let's also talk about the quality of that data. So we've been doing some interesting and fairly nasty studies on what we call, it's an official term, is adversarial machine learning. So I mean, let's pick a controversial topic. Let's talk about distinguishing between humans. So we all hear about how a machine distinguishes between humans, sometimes effectively, sometimes not. But if I give the human your face and my face and say certain characteristics in this face are great and certain characteristics in this face are not so good, the machine will make a determine as to which one of us gets the cup of tea and which one of us gets the thanks and goodbye letter. If I'm nasty and I'm an attacker or an adversary and I go into that data stream and I say, no, 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 no. Rather than saying red beards are good, let's see red beards are bad. Rather than saying, hey, red scarves are a warning sign, let's go look at red scarves as being good. Red in certain placements. So my red beard is okay. Your red scarf around here is not okay. Now let's change that around. And I start to train the machine on my version of data rather than your data stream. How are you testing it? How are you understanding it? And also now you get the yay, thank you, and I get the boot. And so all of a sudden, we see it in medical intelligence systems. You see machines making decisions based off of characteristics. Well, what's the source of the data that it made that decision on? How trusted is that source of data? We take 1 + 1 = 2, unless you're messing around with mathematics, is a fairly standard thing. But if I mess around and say 1 + 1 has to equal 3, all of a sudden the machine goes, gotcha. And now it makes a whole bunch of decisions based off of that. So my concern is severalfold. It's that quality of data, the type of data, the source of data. And then honestly as well, the other big one in intelligence systems is whose bloody hands are on the keyboards programming it in the first place. I mean, we have an issue with getting enough people in a diverse enough spectrum. And we're not just talking race, religion, color, region. We're talking diversity of ideas as well. I love Hit Squad. I mean, the team that we have is hilarious. We've got myself, we've got Jesse, who wears overalls from Nebraska, and we've got a guy who came off the bloody reservation. And and that's, so there's 3 of us with crazy diverse ideas. but we all come together and we can figure it out with some amazing results. Yet you look at the intelligence systems, and unfortunately, a lot of the coding and programming is being done by a very, should we say, standard type of human being.
Right, right. Let's talk a little bit about let's talk about bias a bit, and then also
Implicit and explicit bias.
yeah, just bias. So these things concern me greatly for obvious reasons, right? Knowing
Totally.
that Black women are often very often, I think the statistic is 10 times more often misidentified in facial recognition
It's crazy. Yeah.
systems. And, there aren't enough diversity, like you said,
Yeah.
not just creed or color, but also diversity of ideas, in these spaces. And, it concerns me, right? Because a lot of these technologies are being used for life and liberty decisions. And it's sort of, how do you fight your way out of that? So I'm just concerned about kind of the over data collection, the inferences that are being made without sort of your knowledge, and then what happens next.
Well, that's where it gets really interesting, because we've gotten to a point, unfortunately or unfortunately, where we don't necessarily trust the system. Yet we need to collect more data to effectively train the system. And yet, exactly to your point, I mean, you go to a population that's already had issues with the system, and you say, hey, I need to collect more data on you. They're like, why? What are you going to do with it? So now you have to look at trust inside the system. You go back to a system and say, hey, I've got to take more data on you. Well, on one hand, yeah, I'm actually happy. I want to train the system. But on the other hand, you're like, what the hell are you going to do with this data? And who's going to have it? Who's going to look after it? Who's going to manage it? Who's going to be effective with it? And ultimately, what the hell are you doing with it? I mean, it's we didn't start off on the right foot. This, I think, is the biggest problem. We look at statistics, and this is the one thing I think that drives me nuts with statistics. Is I can look at statistics and make them say anything I want them to say. We all can. Absolutely. And that's part of the problem, is we've not been consistent. We've all not sung from the same song sheet, which is part of the other problem. I mean, you look at society, and if it was the same voice being used to describe what we're doing, how we're doing it, and we use the same terminology to describe what we're doing and how we're doing it, we might be in a better chance. But we've got so much, honestly, so much bloody infighting, that if I come to you and say, hey, look, I want to train my intelligence system to more effectively represent people who aren't bright, white, and old American males or old English European males, on one hand, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to take it. And if I tell you what I'm going to do with it, now I've got to fight off the 20 other companies and try to dispel what they're saying before you even get to a comfort level of going, all right, I have a level of trust with you. So it's another one of those. Until we can instill more trust in the system and more trust in the data, and until we can see, actually, it's not even see, until we can highlight. And this is one of the other things. News always likes bad things. We see 100 bad situations where technology is used for the negative, but rarely do we see, or rarely do those stories bubble to the surface where technology is being used for the positive. We ran into it. So a perfect example would be when Snowden went off the rails and released everything. The agencies, we took a lot of stick for plugging into the feeds from like Facebook and LinkedIn and everybody else. We got a shit ton of stick for that. Everybody's crying liberty and privacy and everything else. What did not come out of any of that were the several hundred instances where that data had been used to correctly identify somebody who was one step away from walking into a building with a freaking bomb vest on, or doing another McVeigh under a building. That's the stuff that never did come out. So you rarely do you hear the positive stories. You unfortunately always hear the negative stories. And that, I think, again, that's a problem with news and media, and especially the social media aspect, where things just get blown up so quickly that you just don't have time to react to them.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about this is interesting. So I feel like the future is about your gaze, right? Your eyes, what you look at, what you like, what you love, right? That's the information that companies want. That's what advertisers want. And I think
Big
going
time on the
into
screen. Where are you looking? Where's your mouse moving? Where are your eyes looking? How long are you hovering over? So, oh my gosh, I mean, there's an entire industry, and it's crazy how big it is. There's an entire freaking industry that's just wants you to like click one more time. That's scary.
but I mean it brings up privacy issues, and then I guess the friction there is, let's say you're in public, so
Mm-hmm.
so the things you look at, maybe that isn't protected, right, because it's in public, right, but maybe the inferences that are being created by what you look at and what you see, those things. I think there's going to be a fight about who owns that information. First of all, it's being collected. We already know. And then,
Oh
like
yeah.
you said, like statistics, it can be utilized in all types of different ways that could possibly be harmful to a person. That may become a privacy issue.
It's to me, honestly, it's not even a can be harmful. It is, and this is so. I've got an amazingly good friend, and I absolutely freaking love him to death. However, he has different views than I do. So we have a number of times gotten into conversations over, let's say, different viewpoints on the vaccine, different viewpoints on presidential stuff, different viewpoints on humans, whose lives matter, whose lives don't matter, why this, why, and we've gone into some really interesting discussions. And so I sat down with him once and we went through our browser history. And I'm like, okay, if you look for this and I look for this, what do you see? And if I look for something, I see this. And if he looks for something, he sees this. And I'm like, okay, we both typed in exactly the same thing. Why do you think that is? And why do I think that is? So we start talking about how not just Google, but I mean, almost without fail, pick most of your standard browsers. In one way, they're like, we'll help you. We'll serve up the content you want to see. But if you're continually looking for, aliens at Area 51, every single time you look for something even akin to that, it's going to serve you stuff that it thinks you want. So we end up getting into this funnel. And this funnel gets narrower and it gets narrower and it gets narrower. And then 3 weeks later or 3 months later, we find ourselves with a tin foil hat on our heads, understanding that under Denver Airport, we've got the lizard people that are running the government, and the Illuminati is basically at the core of the Hollow Earth. And the Germans are, the former Nazis are actually sitting on the moon base. And you're like, how the hell did I get here? Well, congratulations, welcome to Google search. And then you've got the other people who are completely the opposite direction, who have figured out, how to solve, global warming and putting everything back in the bloody oceans that needs to be there. So, and we're all using the same tools and we're all pulling from the same data sources. But because the system is doing unfortunately, a very, very effective job of profiling us, it's almost being too efficient at handing us what it thinks we want, sometimes before we even want it. And so it behooves us, the human, to ask more questions and to look outside of our comfort zone. And unfortunately, most humans, we're not good at doing that, or we don't like to hear ideas that are contrary to what we believe.
Yeah, I agree with that. I talk about that a lot. I say the analogy I give is like when you're on the internet, it's almost like you think you're in a library, but actually you're in a section of the library that's been chosen for you.
Yeah, and it's been chosen for you. I mean, you walk into that library. I mean, and so that's a pretty good way of looking at it. Because like day one, you walk into the library and it's like, here's the whole library. Day two, you walk into the library and it's like, well, we saw you were in section number 4. Here's section number 4. Oh, we saw you were in 4.2. Well, here's 4.2. Rather than saying, hey, we saw you in 4.2. Hey, do me a favor, just get out of your own head and go look at section 6.4, or go look at section 8.3. Rather than doing that. And again, as humans, we are not always good at looking in the mirror, questioning what we've been told. Plus, for good or for bad, everything on the internet's true.
Right.
you know,
Absolutely.
it's tough.
It is. It
It's
really
really
is
tough.
tough.
That's And especially, for good or for bad, you take the internet as one source, and then you look at news media and you tie in news media and what they're pulling off the internet as well. And all, I mean, I use news very, very loosely. And again, I don't care whether you're left side, right side, or right down the flipping middle, they're almost all as bad as each other because they're pulling from stuff that corroborates their viewpoint. Are they ignoring everything else? It's not quite as important, but they're going to corroborate it. They're going to corroborate their viewpoint.
What is your thoughts about the importance of data privacy? I feel like, I don't know, when companies started having a lot more of breaches and things like that, people started to pay a little bit more attention to cyber security. And then privacy was kind of like the stepchild, the abandoned stepchild until GDPR came out. And then everyone's like, okay, privacy, privacy, privacy. So where do you think we're going with that in terms of, not only just companies trying to figure out how they handle privacy, but also how the cyber and privacy folks can work together?
I, you know, GDPR is a really, really interesting one because you're right. When GDPR came out, everybody was like, "Yes, privacy for the common man and woman and child and beast." And then what happened is all of a sudden the few poor people that were behoven to uphold GDPR suddenly realized that they had more work than they knew what the hell to do with. So now you've got this crazy backlog of companies that need to be assessed and fined and all this other stuff. And they've gone after a couple of big ones, but that's about it. And they've missed so many others. So it feels as if GDPR's also lost a lot of its momentum. It also feels as if a lot the other challenge is, if you take an American centric thing just for a second, as much as I love this country, it isn't a country. It's 48, 50 odd different bloody states that are all fighting their own damn rules and regulations. And what California wants, Texas doesn't want, and what New Hampshire wants, Colorado doesn't want, and what these, I'm like, y'all get your shit together. Seriously, privacy's privacy. Stop debating this shit. Identify the 10 pieces that every single one of your freaking constituents needs to own themselves and just figure this out. Stop putting 50 different rules and regulations into place. Because as a company, I'm laughing my socks off. I'm watching everybody spin and spin and spin and spin. And it's going to be another one of those, well, do I pay attention? Yeah, maybe. Am I not going to pay? I'll just end up in the queue and we'll just put another couple of lawyers on it and the customer's going to pay an extra 20 cents on the dollar. Done.
Right.
It sounds cynical.
Yeah.
But I don't think it doesn't feel like it. Because, I mean, you had New Hampshire and California and a bunch of other states made this, we're going to fight for the privacy of our citizens. Okay. How's that going? Y'all stopped your breaches? No.
Well, I mean, I like to point out to people the difference between the privacy regulation in the US, where it's consumer privacy as opposed to human. And so the example I give for people, especially when they say, oh, well, we have privacy as a fundamental human right, which we don't, right, in the US. An example of the difference is, let's say you're in California. California has a CCPA. If you walk to a grocery store in California, they have to abide by the CCPA, right? Because they're a for-profit business. But you walk across the street to a church and they don't. So what happened? You're still the same person, but your data can be used in totally different ways based on kind of the industry.
And that's what, and again, this is, it should be, I hate to say it, this is where my dictator hat comes in. I'm done giving people the option. And seriously, put me in charge for a week. We'll have this shit figured out. It won't be pretty, but we'll have this figured out because every single one of you, sorry, sons of bitches, that's lost all my data. First and foremost, your asses are going to be tarred and feathered. We'll just start there. And I'm going to make an example of you. Secondly, if you're one of those ones that's putting a lawyer in place to argue rather than actually putting somebody in place to actually go, hey, how do we do this? I'm taking you down as well. And then exactly to your point, it should be one rule for all. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you do. I care what you do with that person's data. Because again, until we, and we being corporations, industry, security, until we can actually show that we care for the very people that we're meant to be protecting, until we can show that, we don't have a leg to stand on. I have no business or no right to come to you and go, hey, can I take 25 pictures of your face because I want to train my system? I have no business doing that because I cannot guarantee that I can look after that effectively. But until I can do that, I have no right and no place. And that's part of the problem. So yeah, but then, okay, so here's a counter to that one. There's a counter to that one. And this is where my big brother comes out, because I have a big brother. I have a big brother mentality as well. I love people to some degree. I love them for about 10 minutes every single day. And that's about it. The other 23 hours and 50 minutes, I just don't like humans. Oh God, they're a pain in the ass.
Oh my
I mean,
goodness.
especially this last year and a half, 2 years. I mean, most humans have lost their minds in the last 2 years. Let's be honest. And so let's see. I'm gonna go to every single person, and we'll take a US-centric approach for a minute. I'm gonna go to every single person in America. I'm gonna go knock on the door. I'm gonna go, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I'd like to inform you that you're now in charge of your privacy. You're now in charge of your data and your social security and your credit card and your information. And have a nice day. Ta-ta now. And, I do that around 330, 40, 50 million houses. How many of those people are actually going to be exactly, yeah. How many of those people are going to be able to look after their data, and how many of them are capable, and how many of them care? How many, you've only got to go on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter, and just Google credit cards. And how many people are like, look at me, I got my first credit card, and they put it up online. Oh, hey, I got my driver's license, and they put the darn picture up. It's like, at what point did you think it was good to show your driver's license and your credit card number to 7.5 other billion people on the internet? Why do we still have scams? Why do people still fall for the phone call that comes in from the FBI director telling them that they have to send them 20 prepaid, Visa gift cards? We as humans arguably can't look after ourselves. And this is where my big brother comes in. This is where, my agency hat comes in. Y'all can't look after yourselves. We're going to do it for you. There is one part of me that wants the robot overlords to take over, because okay, hear me out on this one. Let's go to this one. Let's go all the way on this one.
Mm-hmm.
You got me on a rant. Okay.
Yes, go for it.
You listening into this as well? All right, good. Sweep over to the other side of the bit. All right. How many years have we had a sign on the packet of cigarettes saying, if you buy these and smoke these, your ass will die? What do? Oh, we go buy them. We're going to smoke it. Yeah. Woohoo, because we're free. We can make our own. No, you shouldn't be allowed to be in charge of a kettle, let alone your own personal safety and privacy. Your ass. I mean, you good gods. We sue people because we get told that it's a hot cup of tea, and yet we sue people because it's hot. Seriously, robot overlords, done. I'm getting off my soapbox for a second.
I know. We need help. I think it's actually it's an opportunity, right? Where I feel like consumers, we are helpless. We need help, right? We're not getting help right now. So I think that's a huge opportunity for businesses can actually help consumers in that way.
I think and I think that's it. Again, we've talked about the soft skills. This to me is an education. It isn't telling people do not click something, do not send something. We all have to do that. It's how do I help you ask another question? How do I help you think before you act? Ryan Cloutier, amazing good human being. Another one that you probably should have on the show. Ryan is, he has a really good way of looking at it. We're analog humans in a digital world. And if you think about it, as again, I use this example a lot. As a kid, when you were in the kitchen, your guardian parent or whatever said, don't touch the kettle or don't touch the stove. It's hot, but we still did it. We learned through experience. There is no yet, there is no good way for us to learn a digital lesson, unfortunately, until it's too late. And I think that's part of
Right.
it. Again, data privacy. I don't, hand my credit card over all over the darn place to pay for things, but rarely do I think about it until I get a new one turns up in the post going, hey, you lost it again.
Yeah, once you fall off the cliff, you can't unfall off the cliff, right?
Right. But in the digital world, people keep putting me back on the cliff. Hey, you got another card. Hey, you got another social security number. Hey, you got a post. Hey, you made this mistake. We'll give you that. No, your ass is down. And I think this is the other problem, the other challenge that we have coming into the industry is we in security and technology in general, let's face it, we literally own the keys to the kingdom. If we turned everything off, humanity would be in a bit of a pickle for the most part. There are some amazing people in the Midwest to be like, yeah, great, we can do without it for a bit. We're just going to keep farming shit, and we know what the hell we're doing. And I'm like, yes, but most of us would be screwed. I mean, we're done. We might as well just shoot the neighborhood and start eating your friends and neighbors at that point in time. It's like, I'm going to have you with barbecue sauce and I'm going to have you with mint sauce, because that's about what it's going to come down to pretty quickly. And so, when you start looking at it that way, it's like, how do we help people understand the questions? How do we help people understand what they should be thinking, what they should be doing? And I think that's where it's like, we have a lot to do. We have a lot of work to do in the communication side of the world.
I agree with that. We have to keep pushing forward, that's for sure. What would be your wish if it were the world according to Chris, and we did everything that you said beyond the robot overlords? What would be your wish for privacy anywhere in the world, whether it's law, technology, anything?
Oh, man, that's that would be a huge one. I think it's a tough one. I want I've run into this a number of times because I've got now got a new tattoo courtesy of Gurkon. So I've got the tattoos. Every now and again I have the nails, and I have no hair. I have this. What I want is people not to judge a book by its cover. You want to talk about data, you want to talk about privacy. I want you to look at you. I want somebody to look at me and look beyond what they just see. So you talk about data. I want you to look at all the data. What's all the good that has happened? What's all the amazing things this person has done? How can we judge them more effectively on who they are, what they do, what they bring to the table, what diverse ideas they bring to the table, their thoughts, their processes, rather than just looking at the very first cover page and going, yep, nope, we're done. That I think might be my biggest wish, would be for people to think twice, maybe listen to an inner voice, think twice, rather than just that instinctive, whoa, you're different equals bad.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. I know in the past in the executive roles, sometimes I'll pick people that maybe other people didn't think, oh, I don't think this person's any good. It's like, well, I know what I'm talking about and I know talent when I see it. So I can do what I need to do with the person. So I think that there is there's an old saying that people said in like I heard someone tell me they learned in graduate school that the best person for a job is the person who's done it before, and I don't agree with
Mm-hmm.
that.
No, I'm with you. Yeah,
I mean, no, I
totally.
don't think that. That's kind of a lazy way to think. How do people kind of evolve and grow? And so I've been really proud to be able to take people that were, didn't fit in the box. There is no box as far as I'm concerned. You want to find talented people and have them, do their best. And so I've had people taking them from like different industries even and have them sort of blossom in their career. So I really like that. And I like the fact that they're thinking out of the box. And unfortunately, not everyone thinks the way that we do, but it's been successful for me.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I mean, there was in the world of mathematics, there was a whole an upheaval and an uproar, shall we say, not that long ago. And it was exactly the same way. There was an individual that came out of India, and they hadn't gone through formal education. They hadn't gone through anything kind of, normal or the standard pathway. I'm going to go to Oxford or Eton or Cambridge or Ivy League or something like that. They came at it from a different manner. And I remember hearing their initial theories on some of the theoretical mathematics, and you're like, that is somebody who came at it from an entirely different viewpoint. NASA, there was a story on NASA, so I just saw it come across one of the feeds, that this intern, young kid, came in and discovered new Earth-type planets within 3 days of being there, because they approached it differently. And that's what we have to have. And the only way you do that is if you are actually receptive to looking around and going, how do I find somebody different? How do I challenge myself? Because you're right, the easy way out is like, oh yeah, they've done it before, they can do it again. No, hell no. Just hell no.
Exactly. I agree with that 1,000%. And now, I mean, we're gonna have problems in the future that we never had before. So we need to have different people, different ways of thinking. To me, it's almost like someone saying, I want to hire someone to be like a cloud architect that has like 50 years of cloud experience or something like that. It's like, oh,
Right.
wait a minute. These are emerging issues, emerging risks, emerging technologies where there is no one on their resume that has 5 years of experience in X.
Well, and as you pointed out, you talk about data privacy, and data integration. It's one of those things where the more and more integrated into a business that we become, I can't just have a tech specialist walk down to the manufacturing site and say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. You got a foreman at the manufacturing site, and she goes, excuse me, that shit ain't going to work. And here's why. So rather than fighting it, you sit down with that person and say, hey, how do we make this work effectively? We've got to do some changes. That's got to happen. But how do we do it more effectively? That to me is where we have to step up. The security people, we have to step up. We've always, unfortunately, for a long time, we approached this as we're going to be the special snowflakes. And that doesn't work anymore. It really shouldn't have worked in the first part, but it doesn't work anymore. We've got to eat some more humble pie, like serious humble pie, and go back to the business and go back to DevSecOps and say, hey, sorry, how do we make it work?
I agree with you. This is wonderful. I mean, oh man, I have to invite you back because I could talk for hours.
We'll have more conversations. We've got plenty of soapboxes. You and I can probably both get on and have some conversations.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you too as well. You had put out a post last year about looking at diverse voices within privacy and cybersecurity, and for speaking. And that was wonderful that you put my name on the list, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, I need to do another one of those because I didn't realize. Actually, Rachel, there's another one for you. Rachel Arnold. Oh my gosh, you need to have Rachel.
Rachel, I have to have. Yeah, I was looking at her. I love Rachel.
Is freaking amazing. I have so much love for her. She actually hit me up, and she called me on the carpet. Rightly so. I didn't even realize it. I'm on a panel soon, and I didn't realize it until I looked at the pictures. I didn't get for. I'm pissed off at myself. I didn't give it a moment's thought. Looked at the pictures, all a bunch of old white guys, and I'm like, damn it. And she was the one. She's like, so I'm like, yeah, my failure, my big one. So no, she's good. I got a shit ton of love for her.
I love her. I love Rachel. She's amazing, and she's so funny. Has such a great sense of humor. She's unbelievable.
Well, she's fun. We were up in Grand Rapids at GeekCon the other week, and it was just great because she was up there. And I finally got to meet the man thing, and her man thing's in IT as well. And he's another one of those that's like, I can deal with humans for a certain amount of time and then I'm done. And it's so interesting to see the differences. I mean, she is such an outgoing and an amazing individual as well.
Yeah, she's definitely going to be on the show. So she's amazing. I agree. Well, thank you so much for this. And I'm sure we'll talk more soon. I guess so. I was so excited to have you on the show, and of course we went over time because I just can't stop asking questions. But yeah, we'll definitely do this.
Definitely,
we'll definitely do this again soon for sure. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you. This was fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.